Lucy, and I've always been really interested in how the human body works. I finished my PhD last year, during which I was using stem cells, which I'm sure you've all heard of, are a really amazing, interesting cell population. And right now I'm working on a project on skin. We take cells from the skin, we build models in the lab, and then we use those models to study how skin works, how skin ages, and how we can maybe develop treatments to reduce and combat some of those effects of aging. Previously, we would obtain our stem cells from embryos because in the embryo, the cells have this ability called pluripotency. So pluripotency means that the cell can become any type of cell in your body, so a skin cell, a muscle cell, a liver cell, and there are very few cells that can do that, and most of them are generally found when you are developing from an embryo to form a baby. So we used to get our stem cells from embryos. However, now we can actually get our stem cells from adults. So we can take a cell from skin or from blood, we can send some protein messages into the cell to tell it that we want it to change back into a stem cell, and then that adult cell will then have that property of pluripotency, the ability to become any cell in the body again. Well, first of all, we need to actually get some cells, and we get our cells from donors, young donors, so people in their 20s or maybe even younger, and we also have cells from older donors, so we call these our aged cells, so people in their 50s or 60s. We get two main cell types. We get the cells which are underneath, these are the fibroblasts, and they provide lots of support to the cells on top, which are the keratinocytes, which are the ones that you come into contact with the most. That's the waterproof layer on the top. Young cells, they grow quite fast. They will make models quite easily, and we will get a lot more of those cells. Aging cells, they can be a little bit more difficult to work with because we might not get as many cells, or they might not grow as fast, or they might need some extra support, so extra chemicals added to make them grow. So as well as using aged cells and young cells, sometimes we'll take young cells and artificially age them. So we might add a chemical to the young cells, or we might use some radiation of some sort, like X-ray irradiate them, and that's just to make them behave in a similar way to the aged cells, but it means that we have more of them, or so we can make our models a bit quicker. So we use the young cells, the aged cells, and the artificially aged cells. I think this is a really interesting question because actually stem cells can be used in a number of different ways to help us treat or find treatments to conditions like dementia. First of all, because stem cells have that amazing property called pluripotency, we can make stem cells become nerve cells like you would find in a brain. So we can actually start to study the process of dementia and what happens during the condition. We could also take cells from adults with dementia and make nerve cells with those, so we can understand even better some of the genetic causes of things like dementia. Because we can make those nerve cells, that means that we can test new potential drugs to treat dementia on the cells in the lab. So we'll have a better idea of which ones will work before we give them to patients. And also, the fact that we can make nerve cells in the lab again means that these cells themselves could also be potentially used as a treatment for dementia in the future. So stem cells really do have great potential. Stem cells have this amazing property to become any cell in the body. So yes, they can also be helped to develop treatments for COVID-19 and study the virus. This time, when we have our stem cells, we would take them and we would turn them into lung cells. So there have actually been a few studies, I had a quick look, where people have taken the stem cells and turned them into sort of lung cells, or almost like miniature lungs. This is called an organoid because it's not an organ, it's like a mini organ. And then they have applied the virus to these mini organs in the lab and studied how the virus interacts with the cells, so we can get a really good in-depth understanding of how the virus is causing the symptoms in patients, and we can also try and figure out better ways of treating it or finding drugs that are more specific and target the activities of the virus. So yes, stem cells can definitely be used for things like treating or finding treatments to COVID-19.